Hi guys, it's so great to be back once again. I know I've been away for a while, so in today's video we're going to be starting a new series on FastAPI. We're going to be building a complete project with the FastAPI framework. So if you don't know, FastAPI is a modern Python web framework for building REST API. It's actually very fast and high performance. It's used for building a synchronous API. Alright, so we'll be building a complete REST API, which is going to be a real estate property listing REST API. So it's not your popular dummy blog app or to-do app, but today we are going to be building a real estate property listing service, which entails authentication from user sign up, email verification, forget password, agent service, property service, and also we'll be deploying this REST API at the end of this build. All right. So this is not going to be a crash course. There are so many crash courses online, so you can go through any of those crash courses that's going to take you through the ins and outs of Fast API. And also the documentation is also very comprehensive. You can read through the documentation. There are a lot of tutorials on the documentation that you can have a grasp through. All right, so enough of the talking. So we're going to start right away from scratch. This is an empty folder called fast API underscore project. There's nothing in it. So first of all, we're going to be creating a virtual environment. So we're going to install fast API on that virtual environment. So you can call your virtual environment any name. So I'm going to just call it um, VENV. So our virtual environment is created so we can activate it. Let's say source VENV script activate. I'm on my Windows laptop, but I'm using a bash terminal, so that's why I'm using that. So you can see virtual environment is activated. All right, so first we're going to be installing the fast API, but there are a couple of ways we can install the fast API because fast API actually uses an ASCII server, which is an asynchronous gateway interface. All right, so let's just go to their tutorial guides for user. So I want to show you. All right, so it uses an Uvicorn. So we're going to be using Uvicorn to spin up a server for a fast API. So what we can do, you can install them separately, but you can do one command to say pip install fast API in square bracket all. This will install both fast API and Uvicorn, or you can install them separately by installing pip install fast API, then pip install Uvicorn in square bracket standard. So for this, I think we should run this one command, which will install both of them for us. So we can just bring this into our terminal and then. All right, so our installation is completed, and you can see a lot of packages were installed along with it. You can see the Python multi-path was also installed. Python.env was installed. All right, so even Pydantic was also installed. Pydantic is for data validation, where we used to build our schemas and email validator. So almost everything we needed was installed along with it because of that off flag. All right, so that's fine. Uvicon also is also there. You can see it has direct support for WebSockets, so you don't need to install extra package for WebSockets. So that's that. So let's just create a folder where we're going to put the actual project. So we're going to make directory. I'm going to call this property service or real estate service, or anywhere you want to use. You can use any name. So real estate service. And I'm going to move into real estate service. I'm going to open it in my VS Code. So I'm going to be using VS Code code editor for this tutorial. So you can use anyone of your choice. You can use PyCharm, you can use Atom or whatever one you preferred. All right, so here I'm going to create a subfolder called API. So we're going to put everything relating to our API in here. All right, so here we're going to make this a package by providing the underscore init underscore dot py. All right, to make this a package. So I'm going to be creating the right folder structure for our project. So within our API, we need a main.py as the main engine. We also need also database.py for handling our database connection. And secondly, we also need models.py for defining our database tables. All right, just like in Django, but this time we'll be creating them ourselves. And also we create a schema file called schema.py, which is going to add our serializer file. We are going to put all our data validations and Pydantic model check. So that's that. Then we also can create another folder for rats, which we can also call ratters. All right. Okay, so we can start with this for now. And secondly, we need to install SQLAlchemy, which we are going to be using for database query. So because we don't want to be writing raw SQL, so we are going to be using Postgres as well. So we're going to install the Postgres driver. So if you also go to the documentation under SQL relational database, you can also see the suggest we should install SQLAlchemy, which we use for database querying and ORM operation. So we don't want to be writing raw SQL. So we're going to be using SQLAlchemy. So we just do the pip install SQLAlchemy. So you can just grab this. So this will install SQLAlchemy for us, which will help us set up our database. And also for our migration, we are going to be using um, Ablic. Ablic. Sure if I'm pronouncing it properly. Let's head over to the documentation. It's Alembic Python. All right. So this is what we'll be using for migration service. So by default, FastAPI does not have database migration built in. All right. So it's more like Flask, where you have to build everything from scratch yourself. That's it. It's not like Django, where you have database already integrated for you and so many other stuff integrated for you. But for this, you are doing everything yourself from scratch. Let's check if our SQLAlchemy has finished installing. All right, so that's installed completely. So let's initiate FastAPI. So we're going to say from FastAPI import the FastAPI module or the class. All right, so this we're going to create a class app instance with the FastAPI. All right, so there are some metadata we can set in this FastAPI instance that we create. By default, FastAPI comes with the Swagger documentation and the Readers documentation. By default, is using the um, docs as the path. So you go to slash docs. All right, that is when you start up your server, your ASCII server, and you launch. So you have to go to this endpoint to get the Swagger docs, but you can as well change the routes to the Swagger docs. And if you want to do that, you do that through this instance here. So here we can pass in some attributes like docs URL. So this is we specifying the path we want to use for our documentation. That's the Swagger documentation that comes with FastAPI. So I want it to go to slash documentation, right? Then I can also set for readers as the readers documentation part. And I swear this can also go to the other metadata you can set like the title. Then you can provide a description as well. Okay, you can set your version as well. So I can say this should be version 1.0 or whichever number you want to set as your version. And you can provide your contacts. Contact is an object of the developer, which is name. Lastly, you can provide an email. All right. All right. So for testing purpose, we can just simply create a very simple rat here. So to do that, you use this app instance. Then you specify what um request, what type of request you want to make. If it's a get request, and here you can specify the path. Here you can define sync. Let's say sync. So once we are done with this, we can spin up our server now. So just head over to the location where your project is, and just once your virtual environment is still activated, so you can do Uvicorn space, then inside the folder of app API, sorry, we have main. So what we are targeting is Uvicorn should go into the API folder which we created inside this real estate service, and inside there we have the main module. Then we want to access the app. Then we do dash dash reload for auto reload. Once we hit enter, this will start up our server for us. So we see once we need to visit this part. All right, so now if we visit that documentation part that we specify, you'll see we have our Swagger documentation. So this was provided by FastAPI. We didn't install anything. We didn't have to set this up ourselves. So that's one of the benefits that FastAPI provides for us. So we can easily test out this, try it out. It's not doing much. So once we execute, we can see our API respond test is working. All right. So we can also try out the readers. And here you can see the readers documentation as well. Let's head back to our code. So what we're going to do next is to set up our database. So we're going to be using Postgres database, and for that we have to install the Postgres driver, which is PG2. And secondly, if you don't have Postgres installed on your laptop, you can do that now. There are a lot of guide online, and the installation is very easy. It's a straightforward installation. So you just do that. I already have Postgres installed. And along with Postgres, we have this PGAdmin. So you can go to your PGAdmin and create a new database. So here you see create database. And here you can specify a name for your database. So I can say real. So I hit save. All right. So this will create the database for us. But right now there is no table in this database. We'll use SQLAlchemy to provide it to create our tables. All right. Then lastly, before I forget, we have to install the Postgres driver, which is PG, because I don't want to quit that server. So, all right. So here I can simply do pip install Right. So this will install Cycle PG2 for us. That's successfully installed. That's great. So for us to see all the dependencies that we have installed so far, so we can simply just run pip freeze, do this, and to generate a requirement.txt file for us with all our dependencies. You can see the dependencies that we've installed so far. So firstly, we are going to make some imports from SQLAlchemy, which is the ORM package that we just installed. So we're going to say from SQLAlchemy its engine. And secondly, we also want to import the declarative underscore base from SQLAlchemy as well. SQLAlchemy.x dot declarative. Then we want to import the declarative base. And lastly, we want to import session maker also, say from SQLAlchemy.orm import session maker. All right, so this is what we need for now. So first of all, we want to create a connection between the database that we defined or that we created in Postgres to our application. So to do that, we are going to create a variable called database URL. And by convention, this is a string that contains word Postgres SQL colon dash dash, then your username, which is the username for your Postgres database, will come, then colon, then your password follows. All right, then after that we have at, then the hosts, whatever the host for your database, then the port follows, and then slash the name of your DB, which is the DB name. So these ones I'm just putting this as placeholder, so I don't want you guys to actually see my database username and password. Later on, we'll be handling these credentials with an environment variable, so we'll do that shortly. But for your connections, you just need to input your database username and then password. The host machine for mine is localhost, so I can as well just put that here, localhost. So that one's not a big deal. Localhost. Then the ports will come in. So once we do that, we want to create the Postgres engine or the database engine. So we'll say engine equals to the create engine method that we imported. I want to pass in the database URL. All right, so this is what we're going to connect our database to our application. Then secondly, we want to create a session class. So we'll say session local. I want to set it equals to the session maker that we imported. So what this is going to do for us, this session maker is going to generate a session local class for us to create a session to our database. So this is going to generate the class for us. So this is going to provide the some parameters. One is auto, I think we have auto commit. You can actually get all these from the documentation, they are out there. And lastly, we want to bind with our engine, which we just defined at the top there. All right. So next we need to create the base. So this base class will be generated by the declarative base function. So we need to call this function. We will later use this base in our model when we are creating our database table model. This is the base that we are going to extend in our classes. All right, so these are the basic setup that we need. Don't forget to actually substitute your right credentials into the database URL. But later on, we'll use environment variable to actually handle this secret and every other secret that we'll have in our project. Then lastly, we need a way to expose the database session, so that anytime we want to interact with the database, we can use this simple method. So we have a simple method called getDB, which is going to be a generator. And this, we are going to say DB, we're going to instantiate the session local class, because this session local variable that we are defining here, the session maker is going to generate the class for us, and for us to get database session, we have to instantiate the class. So that's what we are doing in this getDB. So we are instantiating this session maker class that we have. You can see the hints that VS Code is also giving to us. All right, for further elaboration. So once we have this, actually okay, yes, we're going to put a try, and we try. First of all, we want to try and use the DB. If we have the DB, all right. So this is the method that we are going to be using, or the function that we are going to be using to gain access to our database session. All right, so this is creating the session, is using it out for us, and also closing the session as well. All right, so now we are done with the database for now. We will later come back to this database module to do other things. But for now, we need to go and set up our table models. So we already have a file created, which is models.py. So here we're going to define our database tables. All right, so just like your Django models, so we are going to be using that same format to do that. So for that, we have to import some things. We also need to import our SQLAlchemy. Only we want to import that base that we created here, that base and this base class that we instantiated here with this method. So we need to import it. And also want to see from SQLAlchemy, because we'll be using this to create relationship amongst our table. Lastly, let's import one other utility that we'll be using, which is from SQLAlchemy.SQL. So that's that. So firstly, let's create a class for our users. So we're going to call this user, and this is going to extend that base that we imported. And here we're going to define our table name, say table. All right. Then here we can start defining our feed. So we have to define the ID first, which we're going to use SQL.colon. All right. So when we say SQL.colon, what are we referring to? We're referring to the SQLAlchemy, all right, which we rename to be SQL here. So this colon is going to be an integer. So we're going to say SQL.integer. All right. And we also have other parameters like primary key. It's going to be true. And then secondly, we're going to say index, also true as well. And lastly, we want to set the auto increment equals true as well. All right, so that's for the primary key. Secondly, we want the email. You can set variable length, that's number of characters if you want to, like this, and it should be unique. So unique equals true. Index equals true. Then password. All right, so other parameters, other actual feeds that we can also want is like is active. All right, so let's put this also. So the user is always active, then is verified because we also want to verify that user. Then I think another attributes we can also add, or another field we can add is the date joined or created at. Then we're going to provide the server default, right? The server default of now. So we are using this test function that we imported to provide the timestamp, which will be now. So anytime user is created, the current date time will be recorded. I think this also we should instantiate it and put time zone equals to true. Use the current time zone as well. All right, these are the feeds that we need for this model. We'll also be creating other models as well. But first of all, let's start with this. All right, so let's save this. So what we need to do next is to create the Pydantic model for users, to create a new users, and also we'll set up Alembic for migration because currently FastAPI does not have migration built in. So what happens when you create a new model? So when you create a new table model, once you run your development server, it will check your database if the model exists. If the model exists, it will ignore it. Or if the model does not exist, it will create it. And that only happens once. So if, for example, you made some changes later on, it's not going to update the database table because as far as the only job it's going to do is just to check if he exists. And if he exists, it will ignore it. If the table does not exist, it creates it. It does not perform any kind of update or any kind of addiction and all that. So for us to implement migration into our own application, we need to use another package known as Alembic. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that well. We'll visit documentation now. Alembic is a lightweight migration tool that we can use with SQLAlchemy. We'll head over to the documentation. This is the documentation for Alembic. All right. So let's say the installation guide. I think the installation guide, we need to install it with pip. All right. So let's just run pip install Alembic. We just simply say pip install Alembic. All right. So this install it into our virtual environment. All right. So our installation was successful. So the next thing we need to do is, as far as Alembic is installed, we have an Alembic kind of command line tool that we can use to issue commands for Alembic. So if you do Alembic -- help, you'll see the different various commands you can run with Alembic. So you can see here, these are the different commands that you can run. I'm trying to go up. So if you move up, you can see the different command that you can run with Alembic. All right, so first of all, we need to initialize an Alembic. So we need to say Alembic init. Then here we need to specify the folders that we want, the name we want to use for the Alembic folder. That's the migration folder. So I can simply just say Alembic underscore migration. This you can use any name of your choice. So what this will do, it will create a migration folder for all the settings and configurations for our Alembic migration tool. So once we hit enter, you can see here a folder was generated with that particular name that was specified. If you move inside, you see a lot of files and folder. But what we are mostly interested in, we need to make some extra changes in the env.py file inside the Alembic migration folders that was generated. So just move into that folder. Let me move my terminal down and you can see some of the settings. So what we need to actually bring in here is we need a way to make Alembic aware of our tables, our database tables. And so what we need to import is that this base class that we use here. Then one thing is that we will not be importing it from the database or Py file. We'll be importing it from the models file. Why? Because we actually want to get access to the table metadata object that is being created when we use it here. So for that reason, we'll be doing something like from api.models, we want to import the base. All right, so that we'll have access to our different ORM tables metadata. So scroll down here, you have target underscore metadata. You can see they are already showing us a demo here that is being commented out. You can see they are saying add your models metadata object here for auto-generated support. So this we need to change it to be that our base that we just imported. All right, so as the changes we need to do here, and then let me check. Yes, the metadata is already passed to this context.config. Configure is already passed here, and that's all we need to do here. So sorry, it's supposed to be dot metadata. Forgot metadata. All right, so that's the first thing we need to do. Then secondly, we also need to point Alembic to our database URL. Though they actually set it already in the alembic.ini, you can see it here. All right, so you can actually do it here, but it's better we just put everything here, so we can also bring it in here. So what we need to do is we already have Alembic context already imported for Alembic. So just down here, we can simply just say config dot set may option. All right, and in here we can just set, say, that same URL, which is the sql.url, and here we provide the actual URL, then here we can provide the actual URL. So we can just bring this one here, just cut this one out, and you can bring it in here. But this, you have to provide the actual credentials. Driver in this case will be our PostgreSQL. Then our user will be the username for our database, and our password will be our database password, and the host will be then the database name. I think, let me check what we use for our database name, which is real underscore estate service underscore db. That will be our name. So here will be our, all right, so that's for that. So setting the database URL here, and also provide the base class meta object, and the measure is also passed into the context configure, which is already done here. And that is all we need to do for our Alembic settings. So we save, and next I will set up our environment variables so that we can start passing our actual data in. All right, so to create our environment variable inside our API folder, that's our API module folder, where we'll have most of our files in, we're just going to create a config.py file here. So we'll say config.py. All right, so here we're going to be making some imports. This is where we're going to make the configurations to connect our environment variable with our app settings. And here we're going to import some things. We're going to import the path module from Python. So we're going to also import from Pydantic, which is also was installed along when we installed our FastAPI. So from Pydantic, we want to import base setting. So we're importing base settings. Then also we also want to import from .env. We want to import load.env. Load.env. All right, that as well. So what we need to do next is to create a class which we're going to call settings, and this is going to extend the base settings that we imported. All right, so here we're going to define the environment variables that we want to define the type of the environment variables. So if you say db hosts and the type should be a string, then secondly we can have db, I think db ports, the type also can make a string, then db underscore username. All right, those are the environment variables that we have for now. Then secondly, we're going to create a class called config, and here we're going to specify the environment file paths. All right, so here we're going to specify the path to the environment file, and this we have not created the environment variable file, so we'll create that shortly. So what we're going to do, we're going to use f-string, and here we're going to use the python paths module dot path, yeah, and here we're going to specify underscore file dot resolve, then the parent. So this we're going to do slash dot env, which is the file we'll be creating shortly. All right, so this is actually to get the right path to where we're going to be putting the .env file, which is going to be the root folder, which is the base folder. So this is we specifying the location there, and secondly we need to create a get setting function. This is not actually necessary, but it's just a handy function to actually retrieve these settings. So we're just going to return the instance of our settings class. All right, and lastly we can just call the load env. I think we can call it above or anywhere, so let's just put it load env like this. All right, that's all we need to do here. So we can easily just do the get settings, instantiate the class to trigger the settings. So anywhere we actually need to access these variables, we have to call the get settings method or function, I mean. So next thing is to create the .env file. So come to the base folder where we have the requirement.txt. We're just going to create the .env file. And here we're going to put the environment variable using the same name that we used here, but in uppercase. So where we have db underscore name, as well here we'll also do the same thing. All right, so also provide the name for your database username and that of the password. So save both files. Save both files, then move over to where we need those environment variables. And for us to get them, first of all, we need to import that get settings function that we created in the config file. This method, and here we can just create a simple call the get settings method. If you're able to call it to get settings, then here we can use string formatting to load in those settings. So areas where we need the like username, we can simply just use curly brackets in string formatting to say settings dot. You can see VS Code is actually giving us all the environment variables. So what we need is the username. I'll do the same for others. All right, so that's for this db file. So we also need exactly the same thing for the env.py file in the Alembic folder. So we can just simply grab this, This of us repeating ourselves and move over to this file and then paste it here too. Yes, yes. So we just replace this whole thing. And also we also need to import the settings as well. So from api.config import get settings. Also create an instance also of the settings file. This is already done here. Alright. We can okay, so everything is properly loaded. So now we can start making our migration. Hopefully everything is set up correctly. So to make a migration, we are still using that Alembic command line 2 that comes with the Alembic. So to do that, we are going to just simply say Alembic revision. Then we have the auto dash auto generate. And here we can say -m and provide the description for our migration. So the migration we are doing now is creating a users table. All right. All right. So hopefully, if everything is arranged correctly, our migration should run. So it's obviously going to generate a migration file for us where we see the SQL code for that migration. So we are saying Alembic revision that dash auto generate dash m creates a user table. So this is the description. So if we run this, if everything is set well, all right, so we get done. And if you check inside the versions folder, you can see one migration file was created. And if you look at the name, creating a user table was generated. So if you check, you can see the SQLAlchemy SQL code was automatically generated for us. All right, so this migration I created some extra method. You can see the drop down method and also the upgrade method. All right. So to finalize our migration, we simply say Alembic upgrade. As we are targeting the upgrade method that was generated. Head. So head means the latest migration that was made. So we refer to the latest migration as the head. So you see this upgrade method that was generated automatically when we use that command earlier is what we are triggering to finalize the migration. So you say Alembic upgrade, which is this method. Head means the latest changes that was made to this migration. So once we hit enter, you will see run upgrade. All right, creating table. So that table has been generated. So if we go back to our database, let's just refresh our database. So if we refresh and we come over to our schema and we'll scroll down to tables, you see we have one table, user table, and the Alembic version was also created to show that it's Alembic that is actually keeping track of our database versions. So if you see, this is the database that was created, user database. Yeah. So let's see. So right now, look at the feed that was generated, the ID, the email feed, the passport feed is active, is verified, and also the date join. All right. And then that's that. Then you can see, okay, I have there's a typo in our name of our database. If we go back to our models.py and it's supposed to be is verified, but we made a mistake and call it is verified. So if we correct this to be it's verified and we save it, we can as well come back and make another migration because we've made a correction to the spellings in our database. So we can simply say Alembic revision All right. Oh, Alembic or Necronize. Oh, I think I misspelled. It auto generates. All right. So that was also generated. So the new migration was generated. You can see it says this is the migration file that was generated now. So you can see here it's showing us the changes that was made. That so now our latest head now is obviously this um new migration. So we can also do the same thing. Actually run the new migration file that was generated. All right. So that was run for us. So if we move back to our database and let's just quickly refresh this table, refresh this table. All right, you see that that name was actually corrected. So this is what the Alembic migration can help us achieve. All right, so I think everything is set up for us to start creating our endpoints. So what we're going to do, we're going to set up a Pydantic model, which is our schema that should tell us the structure of data that should be sent in our request and the kind of data that should be sent back as a response, similar to what our serializer is doing in our Django application. So that's what the Pydantic model will be doing for us in our schema file. So that's what we'll be setting up next. So, all right, here we have to import from Pydantic. We want to import the base model. As well, we also import feed. All right, so those are the two things we need to import for now. So first of all, we'll create our user base class. This is going to extend the base model. And here we can define the general type that our user should have. So we're going to have email, and the type is going to be string. But if we make it string, any type of string will be accepted. So Pydantic has another uh, validator which is known as email string. Alright, so this will enforce the string to be an email type, that is to have the format of an email. So we'll make it an email type. Alright, so while doing this, there is actually a package that supports this. So that package has to be installed, which is the email validator. All right, so if you do the installation with the off flag, you already have that installed already, which is this email validator. But if you install it individually, like you installed FastAPI separately and you installed Uvicorn separately, you have to also install this separately. But when you do the off tag, that's the FastAPI in square bracket or it was already installed for you. So that's the package that is actually responsible for this, that makes this works. All right, so that's for that. So then we have to define the Pydantic model for user create. This is we creating the kind of data that should be sent along with the request for creating new user. So this is going to extend the base user that we created up. And also, since you're already extending the base user, that means the user is required to provide an email and as well as a password. So password is going to be a type of string, and that's what we need for user creation. Then for user, which is the model that we're going to use for the users, are going to be returned back as a response. All right, so this is the response type that we are defining here. So this is going to extend the base as well. So we're going to pass in the user base also. So the user base, which is obviously the email. Apart from that, we also want to bring in provide the ID of the user, which is going to be an integer, and the is active flag as well, which is going to be a boolean feed, and maybe is verified as well. All right, to know if the user is verified or not. So these are what will be returned back as our response to the user. So this will be the response model. All right, with that out of the way, and there's one more thing we need to provide. For this model to be able to work with Pydantic model, we have to also provide one extra parameter, which is a config class. And this config class, we're going to set the ORM underscore mode equals true. And work with our SQLAlchemy, I mean. All right, so we're going to use the feed that we imported. This feed we imported for Pydantic to provide some kind of metadata and some extra information for each of our feed type. So we're going to say feed, and then first of all, we want to make it require. All right, then we can also as well bring some title or descriptions for this feed. So if you want to provide title, we can say you can provide description for it if you want to, but I don't need that for now. Then we can also provide an example as well. All right, so we can do that, and we can as well do the same thing for our password. And that's that. You can even provide more informations. All right, like you can provide the default if you want to, but it's not available. You can't do that for user logged in. It should be a default. All right, so that's for that. I think we are done here, so we can simply save this file, and let's start setting up our rats. So we already have this router folder created where we're going to structure all our rats for our API. So first of all, we need to create the auth.py file, which is just a file to handle all authenticated rats. That is rats for users management, like creating a new user, verifying email, and then logging user with JWT tokens and all that. So this is where we're going to put all that features. So what we need to do, we need to make some imports. We're going to say from FastAPI, we want to import API router, and as well we want to import status, and maybe depends, then HTTP exception. All right, then we also want to import from our database. This is our database file. We want to import that getDB because we want to connect to our database. Right, so because we need this to be able to connect our applications to our database, like inserting some data in database and all that. And as well, we also need to import from SQLAlchemy.orm. We want to import session, session as well. And then we also need to import that schema we just created. So we can just import the schema file. You can say from import schema. So the schema file we created, which is this our schema file. So we are going out of this directory and getting the file. So these are the basic imports we need for now. So the point is the use of these router folders and all this is just to better organize our rat into separate module. Right, instead of putting all our API rats in the main.py file like this straight up, it's not good practice, especially when you have a lot of endpoints to build. You can just put all of them in one place. So with the help of this router, which uses the API router, we can structure our rat into separate module. That's what we are doing. So we'll have one module to handle everything regarding our user. Then we can have another module to handle properties, and maybe another module to handle agents, like creating new agents updating their profile, uploading their profile pictures, and any other thing that agents can do. So with all this import out of the way, we need to set up the configurations for the API rat. All right, so in here, we're simply going to create a variable called router. which we're going to set equals to the API router. Then in here, we're going to set a prefix for our endpoint. All right. So what we want to precede every endpoint for these auth users. So we want users to always go to /API, then /v1, which is version 1, then /auth. So this we prefix every of our auth APIs. Then as auth API endpoint, then we can set tags as well. Yeah, one set tags, which is going to be a list of string. Here we can say simply user authentication. All right, that's what we're setting here. Then we can start using this rat now, this router variable, to create our endpoint. So we can simply say router dot post. I want to post to /sign up or /register, anyone you prefer. All right, so that will be the endpoint that we are making request to. Then once the status code should be status, which is the status module we imported. We want to say created. Then under this decorator, we can define our view function. That is the API write function. We can use the async, all right, or we can use the normal function. So here I'm going to say async dev register user, and this is going to take the user data, which is going to be coming from our schema dot user create. All right, that's one. Then secondly, we also want the DB. All right, the DB session, which is when we're using the session, and this depends on, we're using the depends module, depends on the get underscore DB. All right, so this is the DB session that we imported from our ORM, and we are depending it on that get DB that we created in the database.py file. All right, so those are the two dependencies for now, so we can proceed. So let's put pass for now and specify what and what we need in this particular function. So what we need, first of all, we need to check the email if we already have a user with that kind of email. So let's put some comments, say check if email already exists. If email already exists, then if that's the case, maybe the email already exists, we need to return back and say email already exists, try again later, or try with new email. And if that's not the case, that the email is valid and it has not been used, we want to hash the user's password. Then create a new user. So these are the main 4 things that we are going to do in this create users endpoint. Sorry, don't forget to put a comma. Yes, all right, that's fixed. So first we are going to install the packages we want to use for password hashing, which is the passlib bcrypt package for password hashing. So if you check their docs, you find that there as well. If you go to security in the official documentation, hashing. All right, so look at the password, the package we need, which is passlib. So you can just grab this and install it. All right, quickly do the installation there. All right, so pip install passlib bcrypt. All right, so once that is installed, the next thing we want to do is this router file, which is this auth.py file. We need to bring it into our main.py. So just save this and move over to the project main.py file where we have our app instance. Here we are going to register those router. So we're going to say from dot router, we want to import the auth module that we created, and just down below after the instantiations of our app, we can as well just come here and say app, which is the variable that contains our app instance, as our FastAPI instance, dot include router. And in here we bring in the auth module dot router. All right. So like this, we've actually connected that our auth router, which is this auth module file, to our main app file. All right. So with that out of the way, we can go back to our main, our auth.py file. These are the 4 steps that we want to take. So what we're going to do is, by convention, or if you go to the docs, they also advise that we're going to create a separate module that's going to contain all the database operations, like maybe adding a new instance, a new object in the database, or making some queries. So we're going to create a separate file to handle all those logic. We can just simply import the functions and use them in our auth file. So what I'm going to do is, just within our API folder, I'm going to create a new file, call it SQL underscore query. You can call it any name of your choice, .py. This is going to contain all the database related logic. So in here, we're going to create the functions we need. So we're going to say dev, first function is to check user exists, and this is going to take in an email as an argument, which is of type string, and then also it's going to take in db as well. So db is going to be of type orm session. So we're going to say from SQLite SQLAlchemy Alembic .orm, we want to import the session. So we're going to make this db the type of db session. So we're going to say of session. All right. So within this function, we can make the query to check if a user already exists. We're going to create a variable called user, which is going to equals the db dot query. All right. And the query we want to check is our models dot user. Sorry, we also need to import models as well. So we're going to say from. All right, so we're importing models. So we're going to make a query db dot models dot user, which is the user model that we have in our models.py file that we are accessing this user table. Here we're going to say dot filter. We're going to filter where the models dot user dot email is equals to the email that was passed as an argument. We're going to say dot first to get the first match. All right, so once we get the first match, which is going to be the only match because the email field is actually unique. So once we get that, we simply want to return the user. All right, so this is the first utility functions that we are going to use, which is the check user exists. You can use any name if you want. Then second one we will need is another function to simply insert new user. So we can call it any name. So let us call it insert underscore new user. All right, so this one is also going to take in the same db session, and also it's going to take in the user schema data. So we also need to import our schema as well. So import schema. So this is going to be match our schema dot user create. All right, so the schema is actually talking about the type of data that we are sending as a request, which obviously is our email and our password. All right, so those are the two data that we need in this case. Call it new user, a variable, create a variable called new user, or call it any name of your choice. And we're going to set it equals to our models dot user model dot user where email is equals to our user dot email, then the password is gonna equals user dot password as well. All right. So once we have this new user generated, what we want to do is we want to use the DB session that we have there dot add. And here we want to add that new user. All right. So once we have that, we want to commit. So we say db dot commit. And once we commit, we also want to do db dot refresh. I want to refresh the new user. And lastly, we simply want to return the new user. All right. So you see, we have a single function that does the check with the email, and we have another simple function that adds a new user to the database. All right. So subsequently, we also create other utility functions that we need for database operation. So that's the two we are going to be using for now. The next thing you want to do is the password hashing. That's the reason why we installed this passlib bitcrypt package for password hashing. So we're going to create a simple file called utis.py. So we're going to create that, call it utis.py. This utis file was created in the wrong directory. It should be inside our API directory. So let me just move that into our API. All right. So it's moving to API now. So here we are going to create the logic to hash our password. So we're going to make some imports. I want to set it equals to our crypt context. And in here, we're going to set the scheme we want to use, which we're going to make a list. And here, we're going to say we want to use bcrypt. This will create a simple function, which we're going to call hash password. And this we simply want to return our context dot hash using the hash function. In here, they want to pass the password. All right, so that's all. This is the point. And this method, this function, we just hash our passwords for us using the hash function from the context. All right, so that's that. So we also need to create another one for verifying password. And this we are still going to use, going to return for us the same pw context dot verify. And this we are going to pass the raw password and also the hash password. All right, so these are the two functions that we need for now. So let's save this. So let's quickly import those. First of all, let's import the SQL query file module that we create. So we import this as well as the UTs. We import the UTs as well. All right. So once we have those imported, so down here we are going to start using that. So we're going to create a variable. Let's call this variable result or respond, anything you want to call it. I'm going to set it equals to our SQL query dot check user, which we're going to pass in the DB session. All right, which is this DB that we're already passing as parameter to our register user, and as well as we want to pass in the user dot email because we want the user email as well. All right, so those are the two parameters. So you can use keyword parameter if you want to, If you want to use keyword parameter, you can use. If you want to use position parameter, you can use. So this will return for us a user if a user exists, or it will return none. So what we want to simply do, we want to check if results, that is if a user was returned for us. We want to raise HTTPS session of status code and status, which is bad request, and a message of. All right. So once we have done that, so if it returns none, that means we don't have user with that email. So we can hash the password by saying user.password, which is the password that the user is entering manually. We want to hash it using that hashing function in our UT. So uts.hash password. We set it to the user's password, user.password. All right. So this will hash our password. So once that is done, so user.password is now a hash password from this point. So then we want to insert the user into DB. So we can say um, user this time will now equals SQLite dot we have insert into DB, and here we want our database, our DB. All right, and as well our user. So user is going to equals, we can as well just pass in the user. So pass in the user, which is the user from the schema that user creates, which is providing the username and password. Pass it to the insert. So once a user is created, we actually want to send an email. So to do that, we are going to install a package called FastAPI mail, and the kind of email verification we want to do is an OTP verification. So we're going to be setting up a very lightweight OTP verification. I think we have a package in Python called PyOTP that we can use to generate an OTP. So let's check it out. PyOTP. Yeah, we have. So this is a package that we can generate, that can help us generate an OTP code with an expiring time. All right, so what we simply need to do is to install pip install pyotp to our terminal. Just simply say pip install pyotp. All right, so oh, sorry. So now we install it. So for sending email, we also need this package, which is FastAPI mail. So we're also going to install in this as well. So just copy this and come back here, paste this, and let's install this as well. Okay, so once that is installed successfully, next we are going to go back to our UTs, where we are going to set up our generate OTP function, and as well as we are still going to create a simple helper function to help us send an email to a user. All right, so first of all, we're going to import some few items. So let's just head over to the docs for this fast API mail. If you scroll down, all right, this is the configurations that we need to connect to our email server. So for that, we are going to be using Matramp to test. Matramp is a testing email service that you can use to test email sending. So just sign up with any of your Google accounts. So I already have some accounts. I'm going to log in and just use mine. So you too should do the same as well. So with that out of the way, let's just quickly grab these configurations and bring them in. So first of all, we need these imports. So let's just grab this particular line. And also we are going to be sending our email as a background task. So FastAPI has a background task already implemented. So we don't need celery. So we just import that background task from FastAPI. Well, all right. So that's configuration that we need. We can grab this configuration, paste it here. So what we are going to do is the right credentials, that's our username, password, mail from, can you leave this as a test email, then port, mail server. We are going to be bringing all that from mail trap. All right. So we're going to be putting them in our environment variable. Remember, we have environment variable files. So we're going to be putting them here as well, and then fetching them here. So that's what I want to do now. If you move over to your Mailtrap account, once you've created your Mailtrap, you can come under the inbox, under email testing inboxes, SMTP settings. Here you see the different SMTP integration, and for Python, you can see they don't have fast API, but we can use this any of these one. This is still the same thing. So what we just need is probably the main server, which is sandbox dot smtp.mailtrap.org, then the port, then your username and your password. All right. Let's see the one of Django as well. All right. So it's still the same thing. You can see even for Django and Flask, they are still using the same main server and your password. And so, irrespective of the Python framework you're using, your credentials is kind of the same thing. So for mine, I'll be bringing my credentials in, and after the end of the tutorial, I'll reset my credentials. So you can't use mine. So you'll sign up and use yours. I can always reset my credentials here. So that's that. So let me quickly bring this into our environment variable files. So we have the mail underscore username, mail underscore password, mail underscore from, and mail underscore servers. So these are the four credentials that we are needing here. So that's that. So the right values also, we have to provide it, bring it into the .env file. So I'm also going to bring in the right values in here. Then also for that, we have to import our settings safe. With this, we can easily start substituting the right credentials here. So in here, all right. So I have all my credentials set up. So let me just walk you through what we did. So the email credentials, I added them to my .env file. I know I'm going to change it later on, so there's no need even if I show you guys. So you can see the mail from, the mail ports, all of them was added here. You can use it to bring them in here, and then that's what we have done. So once we have that, I think we can start creating our mail function now. All right, so we can pick it up from here. All right, so that's all we need for the docs. So let's go back and create a simple function. Let's just create a simple function down here. We'll call it dev send underscore email, and we want to send an email as a background task. So FastAPI has a background task, so background task, that's the one for FastAPI. Then the subject of our email coming in, which is also going to be a string, and the recipient is going to be a list. All right, so we're going to import some. Okay, let's import list from typing. So there's a, you can say from typing, we want to import lists. All right. So once we import the list, we put it here. So the recipe is going to be a type of list. And lastly, the message is going to be a string as well. It'll be a type of string. So that's all. So we can come in here and let's put in pass now. All right. So first we are going to create the message. So we can just simply create a variable called message, which is going to use the message schema, all right, that we imported. We imported the message schema from the FastAPI underscore mail. That we'll use first. Then in here, we're going to provide this variable for subject. We're going to provide our own subject, recipient, and then the message on its body is going to be our message that's going to come in. And lastly, we have a subtype, which is going to be HTML. We're going to see FM fast API message equals to fast API mail, which is going to take in the config, which is the connection config, which we store as config. Remember, if you scroll up, you see that we store it in this variable called config. So that's what we are passing to the main, to the fast mail class. Right. So one thing is that we want to send our email as a background task. That's the more reason why we are bringing in this background task type in here. So now what we're going to simply do is say background task dot add task. All right, this one is actually from fast API. It can be used anywhere. So to how to pass any function as a background task is you pass in the function comes in. If the function has any argument, it comes as a second parameter to this add task. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to say fm, which is this fast mail object, dot send message, which is the function that's going to send that message, and the message that it wants to send, which is supposed to be the parameter or argument for this function. We're going to pass it as, because this send me function is actually the function that is doing the job of sending the mail, passing the message like this. All right, and that's all we need to do in this case. So this is all the need for the send me function. I want to quickly create the function to generate an OTP. So for that, we also need some other things. We need to import OTP, the PyOTP that we installed. So we simply import it. So import PyOTP. And for that, we are also going to be needing something. So if you're generating a secret key, and this is what we use to generate a secret, so we use the PyOTP function to generate using a random underscore base 64 base 32, that we can say secret equals to PyOTP, which we import dot secret. Then we'll simply say time underscore OTP is equals to PyOTP dot T OTP, and this is expecting the secret and the interval. All right, so interval talks about the time, so it's in seconds. By default, is if you don't provide the interval, it's going to use 30 seconds. That means the OTP that's going to generate will expire in 30 seconds. But if you don't want that, you can use this interval to specify the number of time in seconds. So I'm going to make it 120, that is to make it 2 minutes. So this token is going to last for 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, it's going to expire. I think that's enough time for a user to grab the token from their email and provide it for the site. 2 minutes is more than enough. Or if you want to increase it, you can increase it to maybe 3 minutes. I think that will be 180, I guess. That's 180 seconds, make it 3 minutes for the token to get expired. So with that, we can simply define the generate OTP code. The OTP is equals to time OTP that's now, and we're going to return OTP. So we can also create a verify OTP, which is simply just to check if the OTP has expired. If it has expired, it will return true. If it has not expired, it will return false. So it's taking code as a parameter, and which is representing the OTP code. So we just want to return our time OTP dot verify. This you pass in the code. So this will return true or false. So if the code is still valid, it will return true. So once we have this basic function to generate an OTP and to check if the OTP is still valid or not, and we have our send mail function, I think we are good to go. So for us to use the send mail, which is going to send the OTP to the user, we need the user's email, which we can get from this user's object that we are inserting, and we need also the OTP as well. And before that, we also need a way to associate an OTP to a particular user. All right. And remember, we want to update the user model because the user model has a feed which is called is verified. So obviously, once the user provide the OTP that's been sent to them, we want to update that its verified feed to become true. So for us to do that, we need a way to connect the generated OTP to the user. So for that, we are going to create a simple model called user OTP model, which we are going to pass in the generated OTP to the user that is being created. So we also create a class. All right, on the latest cascade, that's fine. Then the code, which is going to be the OTP code, right? Then we can just provide one more field, which is going to be the is valid. So it's going to be a boolean value. So is valid by default will be true, but once we use the OTP to verify the user, we want to change it to false so that that OTP will no longer be used again. So we need to run migration using Alembic as we did before. All right, so that migration has been generated for us. Columns that was generated, so that's good. So we can migrate by big upgrade head. All right, so this has run our migration, and we can close this. So what we want to do next is simply create a simple schema for our OTP data here by simply creating a simple class integer and the code, that's what we call it. So the code is going to be an option feed. So let's import option of optional string, which we're going to provide default value to be none. So we need to import option as well from, let's say, from typing. So once we have optional imported, so that's fine. Then lastly, let's create a simple config All right, so these are our schema, so we can save this. So once we have our model and our schema ready, I think we are good to go. So we can head back to our auth.py file. So here we are going to generate our OTP first. So this will generate our OTP codes for us. And then we're going to set the schema. All right, so let's say OTP. Let's go back to our schema. I want to confirm something. Okay, our schema is expecting the user ID and the code. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to create the database operation to insert our OTP, our generated OTP, to the database that we just created, which is the one-time password database. So we're going to do that here. User ID. That is this schema OTP. That's what we're referring to now. And it's also expecting a code, which we're going to set equals to our OTP dot code. All right. So once we have those data inserted, we need to call our db dot add new OTP. All right, so this is the function that is going to insert the generated OTP into the database with the user ID. The purpose of this is actually to associate a user to an OTP. With that, through that means we can query for a user where we want to verify the email. All right, we'll create an endpoint to actually verify the email. That is when the user received the email already and they have the OTP. They use that OTP to verify the account. So we need a way to bind the OTP to the user so that we can get the account that the OTP belongs to. And once the users are verified, we can change the status of the is verified in the user model. So once we have this fixed, we go back to our auth user. Here we can say OTP data equals to our schema dot OTP data, and here we want to quickly say OTP data dot code is equals to our generated code, so our OTP code. All right, so once we have that, we can SQL dot create user OTP, and this is expecting the DB. All right, and also is expecting our OTP data. OTP is equals to our OTP underscore data. All right, so this is called, but before this is called, we need to send the email. So we need to also call our send mail function, and that we need the message. So we need to construct the message. We have the OTP, the user ID. Also, we also need to provide the user ID. So in this case, we can say OTP data dot user ID is equals to our user dot ID. Right, that is, we are referring to this user that was created as a variable user dot ID. So all these, we add the user ID and generated OTP to this schema so that we can pass it to the create OTP for user. Before then, we also need to send the email. So in this case, here we're going to provide the message, because for us to send our email, we need to provide an image. So we can call it utis.sendMail. So this is expecting first our background task. We also need to provide the background task. Let's check if we're already passing it. We are not passing it yet, so we also need to pass it. So we can pass it into, so here where we have the user schema database, we can as well pass the background task. So I can say background task. I don't think we've imported it yet, so let's quickly import that now. So just from FastAPI, We also import background task. So pass the background task and don't forget to provide the comma. So that solves that. So that background task, we can now bring it in here. So pass the background task is passed. It needs the subject, it needs the recipient, and also needs the message. All right. So let's construct our subject. Let's construct our message. So for the message, I'm just going to paste that here. Right. So we are using Python string formatting to construct our message, and then here we just using some HTML. What we are actually doing is we are inserting the OTP code using Python string formatting, right? Using the format method, and we are passing the email and also the OTP code. So this is the email message, the head one, which is email verification. Please verify your email. Here we want to insert the user's email with the message continue with the OTP code below. So we have our message. We can start passing them into this send mail function. Short the subject. We can simply say verify your email. And also taking a recipient, which is going to be the user's email. Then lastly, we pass in the message. So we pass in the message, which is the message that we just created. So pass in the message. All right. So that is all we did. So first of all, we check if the user exists, and if the user exists, we return an error message that that email is already taken. If the user does not exist, we hash the password that the user provided and we insert them into the database. Once we do that, we generate an OTP for the user and then send an email to the user with that OTP. So once we do that, we create a boundary or we bound the user to an OTP. So by using this simple logic of creating OTP for user with the same OTP that was sent to the user. So once that is done, I think that's all. We can just return a simple message of saying account created successfully. Please verify your email. All right, so we are just sending out this message as a response. The account created successfully. Please verify your email with the one-time password sent to your email. All right, so that will be our message. All right, so let's double check everything and make sure. Okay, I think everything is fine. All right, so before we test out this sign up endpoint, let's just create the email verification endpoint as well so that we can test both at the same time. So what I'm going to do is simply create a new route. So router dot is also going to be post because this is when the user is going to send us the OTP that they just received. This is also going to take in this place it's going to take in the OTP because we're going to send it the OTP. So here we're going to create a schema for it. So let's just say schema dot one time password. We've not created this schema yet. We'll create that shortly. So after that, we also need to pass in the DB section as well. All right. So let's put pass for now. What we're going to do is simply go and create this schema to define the type of data that we are expecting. So, which is basically just the OTP. OTP. All right. So in our schema file, we are going to create one more schema. Say, all right. So just the code. That's what we are expecting. This is what we are already using here. Okay. So that's out of the way. So let's reason together what we are going to do now. What we are going to do is, first of all, we are going to receive the OTP that the user is sending. Then we are also going to query the user one-time password model that we created to get the user that is bound to that OTP. Then we'll check if the OTP is still valid. If it is valid, we query for the user. Once we have the user, we can update the is verified feed of the user model. Then once we verify that, we also change the is valid feed of the one-time password to false. So then in that case, user can no longer use that OTP once the is valid is now false. So that's what we're going to implement now. So what we're going to do first is say get OTP user query. So I want to put this here because we're only going to be using it just here. So I don't want to put it in the SQL query module because we are not going to be reusing this logic. So let's just do the query here. That the user is sending. All right, so we have this query. We can say once we have the query, we can say OTP underscore user is now equals to our OTP user query dot first. All right, so we have that model now. So what we're going to do, we're going to say if is I'm going to create a variable called is valid. This is going to equals our UTs dot verify OTP. So this will take in the OTP dot code. All right, so if this returns true, that is when we want to update the user's feed. So what we're going to do, we're going to say if is valid and OTP underscore user dot is valid is false. All right, so if this is true and this is false, or better still, we can use, since both of them is boolean, we can say not. All right, if it's valid and not OTP user dot is valid, we want to start performing the update. So first of all, we are going to get the user that this OTP is bound with. So we're going to say user underscore query right. So remember we have the user ID as part of this OTP user data. All right. So if you come to this models.py file, this user one-time password model has a user ID. So we are retrieving this user ID and use this user ID to get the user that we are trying to verify. So that's what we are doing here. All right. So this will grab us the user query that we are trying to update. All right. Then we can easily get the user by saying user equals to user underscore query dot first. All right. So we can simply say if not user, we want to simply raise so if we successfully get in the user that we are trying to verify, all right, once we successfully get the user that we're trying to verify, we can start making the update query. All right, so if we have the user, we can simply say user underscore query dot update. All right, and the feed we want to update is the is verified feed. I want to set the value to true. All right, and we want to pass in synchronize session equals to true. All right. Okay, so this will update the user feed for us. So once we also do that, we also want to update the OTP user query. We want to change the is valid feed. So we'll update this as well and say to set the is underscore valid. We want to set it to false. Once we've successfully verified the user, synchronize true. All right, let me go check something. Okay, sorry, doing putting the open parentheses. All right, so you get what we are doing here is we are checking if is valid is true, and if, oh sorry, this should be if is valid is true and if OTP dot is valid is also true. So when these two conditions are true, because defaultly this is valid is true here, we set it to true by default. So if both of them are true, it means the OTP code is still valid. All right. So when that is true, we are getting the user, we are updating the users is verified feed to true. And once we have verified, we update that, we also update this value to false. So once we do that, we need to call db.commit. After that, we simply return a simple respond, and we can return, let's say, status, anything. You can return a simple status message. We are respond. I think we are done here. So let's go through it one more time and make sure everything is done right. So first of all, through the OTP code that the user is going to provide for us, we query the user OTP, user one-time password model to get the user that is attached to the OTP. Once we have that user, we check for the validity of the OTP using the verify OTP utility method that we created shortly some time ago. Then after that, we do the if is valid and if the OTP user dot is valid is true. This check is to make sure we can't reuse it once we've used the OTP before. So once we've used the OTP, even if the time of the OTP has not expired, because the first verified OTP, this is using time expiration, and we set this to expire, I think, in 3 minutes or so, right? So in case maybe the person used the OTP for the first time and the verification was successful, but the time has not elapsed and the person tried to reuse it again, maybe for some reason, this simple line of code will actually prevent that. All right, we also need to handle what should happen if peradventure the OTP code is not valid or the OTP code has been used. So in that case, we must handle the S block. So if peradventure for anything, maybe the code has expired before the user used it, we want to handle the S block. So in the S block, we also want to change the query. We want to also update the is valid to false, because that also need to be false in this case. And then we want to return message. So that's the case of this invalid message. So for us to be able to return maybe a status code, failed status code, we will need to import the respond object as well. And this we can pass this along with all this data. So we can say respond is equals to the respond model. And in here we can simply say respond status code. That we do. So that will give us the status code for a failed email verification. So I think with that, out of the way, we are set to test our sign up and verification endpoint. If we measure our server is still running, okay, mine is still running. If I head over to the docs and just refresh, and you see the two endpoints that we created are there, the register user endpoint and also the email verification endpoint. And remember, we set up email for with Matra, which we should be able to receive any email that we sent here. Docs, let's try it here. And for signing up, we expect to provide an email and a password. So let me just say this is 4321. All right, so let's try it out. Our code. So if we hit execute, let's see what happened. All right, we have 201 created. Message account created successfully. Please verify your email with the one-time password sent to you. All right, that's what we expect. So let's go and check up our email, and let's refresh this and see if we have an email. Refreshing. We are not getting the email. Okay, it has come. Sorry, it took some delay. We have it. You can see it's a few minutes ago. So if we check the email, it's loading. Okay, fine, nice. We can get our OTP code, which will take 2 minutes or more. So just grab your code and let's head back to our docs and then to the next endpoint, which is verify email endpoint. Let's try this out. And this is expecting our code, so we can pass our code over. Then we can execute. And let's see what happened. We have 400 invalid OTP, or OTP has expired. Okay, let's find out what happened. All right, it's actually working. The error we had was we set synchronized session to true at this point where we are updating the is verified feed and where we are updating the is valid feed. So our synchronized session was set to true. That's why we're having that error. So what you're using to do is to turn them to false, both of them, and this as well. So once you save your file, if you head back and try it again, you see that it works fine. So let's try it one more time. So okay, let's try it together one more time. All right, so I'm trying this again. So once we hit execute, oh, something went wrong. What's that? I'm getting some strange errors. Everything worked fine. Shortly, let's debug this together. Let's find out what the issue is. Our database. Okay, that user was actually created. Let's just try one more time. Let's just try one more time. Find out. It's not even reloading. I guess I need to restart my server. Okay, so let's refresh this and let's try it one more time. All right, so if we hit execute, okay, we have 200 and 201. I mean, account created successfully. Let's check our email. All right, we received an email. So let's grab this quickly for 2 minutes and let's head back and then come over to the verify email endpoint and provide that code. All right, so if we hit execute, all right, we have 200. Account verified successfully is verified equals true. So if we go to our database, and let's refresh. All right, so you can see the last user that we just added, which is the test user 21, is verified was set to true. So you can as well create maybe an endpoint to resend the OTP in case for a user that has expired OTP. That you can do that on your own. But for this tutorial, we are going to leave it here. All right, I'll clear. See, we can create new user, and the user is receiving an OTP code, and that OTP code can be used to verify the user email. Everything works fine. So what we just need to do was to restart our server. So all right, I'm going to end this video here because it's already getting too long. See you guys in the next video.